Welcome to Conversations with Big Rich. This is an interview-style podcast. These interviewed are all involved in the off-road industry. Being involved, like all of my guests are, is a lifestyle, not just a job. I talk to past, present, and future legends, as well as business owners, employees, media, and land use warriors. Men and women who have found their way into this exciting and addictive lifestyle we call off-road. We discuss their personal history, struggles, successes, and reboots. We dive into what drives them to stay active in off-road. We all hope to shed some light on how to find a path into this world that we live and love and call off-road.
Whether you're crawling the Red Rocks of Moab or hauling your toys to the trail, Maxxis has the tires you can trust for performance and durability. 4 wheels or 2. Maxxis tires are the choice of champions because they know that whether for work or play, for fun or competition, Maxxis tires deliver. Choose Maxxis. Tread victoriously.
Have you seen 4Low magazine yet? 4Low magazine is a high-quality, well-written, four-wheel drive-focused magazine for the enthusiast market. If you still love the idea of a printed magazine, something to save and read at any time, 4Low is the magazine for you. 4Low cannot be found in stores, but you can have it delivered to your home or place of business. Visit 4lowmagazine.com to order your subscription today. On today's episode of Conversations with Big Rich, my guest has been a friend for about 24 years, the first 10 Benders Club member that I met. He helped me locate and secure our first CalRock season event site, known as Lions Pride Park. He competed in the F-Toy class, and known on Pirate 4x4 as D-Toy or Desert Toy. John James, so happy to have you on the podcast. How are you doing?
I'm doing great, Rich. Thank you for having me.
And the handle was Desert Toy, right?
Yes, Desert
Okay.
Toy.
But I remember everybody used to say D-Toy. But
Yes.
cool. So let's start at the very beginning. And where were you born and raised?
I was born in Fontana, California at Kaiser Hospital. My dad had just became a San Bernardino County Sheriff. So by the time I was 1 year old, we moved to 29 Palms, where my dad was a resident deputy.
And you have a brother, but are you the oldest?
No,
Okay.
my brother Mark is 10 and a half months older than I
Wow. Not a whole lot of time between those.
am. No, they got with it.
10 and a half months. Okay. And that's Mark, right? Okay.
Yes.
And from 29 Palms, how long were you there?
Well, 29 Palms, I think we migrated to Yucca Valley because it's kind of one area in the Morongo Basin over there. And my dad was a resident deputy and I think a detective. And in, I think, 1979, he got promoted to sergeant in a place called Lucerne Valley. So, which I'd never heard of at the time. I was 12. And so we moved to Lucerne Valley. And that's where my mom still lives. And, I live in Apple Valley, which is an adjacent town.
Right. And what was it like growing up in that high desert area? I mean, it's wide open.
It's wide open. I mean, it's easy to say there's nothing to do, but, my brother and I were of similar age and similar interests. So we just became desert rats. My dad was the local cop, so that was a little rough at times. We had to learn how to fight early, and we were little guys. And so, where one of us had gotten a fight, we both got in a fight just to keep things going. And naturally, we became off-roaders. My dad had a FJ40 Toyota Land Cruiser that he'd put a small block Chevy in. And so when he wasn't being a cop, we were fishing and hunting and going to the river. And my dad loved going camping. We spent a lot of time in Baja. So growing up, that's what we did. We literally rode motorcycles from our house. We didn't have a trailer to tow them around with because we can just ride them from the front door.
Right. And was was him being a cop more of an issue when you were in Yucca Valley, 29 Palms area,
No,
or
because we
when?
were pretty young then.
Okay,
I when we moved to Lucerne, like I say, I was 12. So we went to junior high and high school when we lived in Lucerne Valley, and that was when it was rough because there was kids our age that was getting into trouble, and we were the local cops kids. So
they
and it
took
was
it
a
out on you.
small town, yeah, and it was a small town, so everybody knew everybody.
It's still a small town,
Yes, yeah, I called the one horse town. Yes.
one horse town. So then, school back then, was it something you enjoyed?
I'm not going to say I enjoyed it. It's something I got through. I mean, from early on, I figured out what auto shop was, and that was my place. Um, so yeah, that was the only thing I really enjoyed. My brother and I were in the band, and that was kind of fun. But yeah, in high school, I figured out auto shop was the place I wanted to be, and so I kind of migrated towards that, and I excelled there, and I just got through the rest of high school.
So you said you were in band. What instrument?
Trumpet,
Trumpet. Okay,
yeah.
interesting. And the did you play sports while you were in school at all?
No, I wasn't. Like I said, I was a little guy. You wouldn't know it now, but I think when I graduated high school, I weighed about 125 pounds, and I was barely 5'4" or something. So, yeah, sports didn't really do anything for me. I was more of a motorhead. I like to go home and take things apart, and as we got our driver's licenses and got into driving, drag racing was the thing. So that was my first thing I got into was drag racing.
And what was your first car?
Well, our first car, my brother and I had to share it. It was a 65 Dodge Dart four-door wagon that my grandma gave us. And I mean, certainly it wasn't fast or not even something you like to fix up, but we were young then. I mean, to tell you the absolute truth, Rich, the funnest thing to do when we were 15, 16 was to take that Dodge Dart and drive as fast as we could down dirt roads and throw the spare tire out the rear and see what it would do. And you'd be surprised what a tire would do at 60 miles an hour to a tree.
That was a real chick magnet.
Oh, yeah, totally. But then slowly, we got a little older, and my brother got a 68 Camaro. I think I had a 672 Plymouth Satellite, and probably at the end of high school. And we were, screwing around. It was big in Apple Valley to go over to Corwin Road and drag race in the evening on the weekends. And my brother with this 68 Camaro, we fixed it up, and through auto shop, I figured out how to rebuild motors, and we met the local hot rodders in Lucerne Valley, the guy that owned the 76 station, Bob Bryant, and he introduced us to bracket racing and stuff like that. And so we built my brother's 68 Camaro into something that was halfway fast, and we would race it out at Corwin Road on the weekends. We had a blast doing that.
And that was just like grudge racing, no lights or nothing sanctioned, right? Like more
No,
like
no,
Street
yeah, it was.
Outlaws beginning.
Yep, it was literally running from the cops, and we'd go to
Which
the
was your
plaza in
dad?
Victorville. Yeah, no, my dad was in Lucerne. Luckily, he would hear about what we would do, but luckily we tried to leave before the cops actually got a hold of us.
Right.
Because the problem is, if they did get a hold of us, they knew who we were, so it was actually worse.
Right. Exactly. And so, how long did you guys street race like that?
Yeah, I ended up buying, trading that, and ended up with that Camaro of my brother's, and I kept that thing probably till uh, the 19 mid 1990s.
Oh
I
wow.
did a bunch of work for it or with it, tubbed and narrowed it, and I took it to Phoenix with me when I moved to Phoenix for a short period and raced it out there, and probably got rid of it in the 90s. Actually, I took the engine and trans out of it, put it in a sand rail, and raced sand drags for a while.
Oh, that's quite cool.
Yeah, yeah,
Down
I got
in
it
the
out.
Phoenix area, or
No, I was still here down in Glen Helen,
okay,
but you get in a lot less trouble with a sand rail than you do with a streetcar.
right, right. Especially if you're at a track area, an actual track,
Yeah, right.
or at
Yeah,
Glamis or someplace like that.
right.
So then you you graduated, what, mid '80s?
Yep, 1984.
'84. Okay. And did you work while you were in school?
I worked at a local place called Albert's Automotive in Lucerne Valley, working on cars. The guy Albert paid me $20 a day, and I loved it. Learned everything I didn't know from auto shop. I learned from Albert, and from there I figured out, I either want to be a mechanic or a firefighter. And at the time, you would know it now, but at the time, firefighters didn't get paid very well. So I decided to be a mechanic. So I signed up for Universal Technical Institute in Phoenix and went through their auto diesel program in 1985.
Okay. And that's what got you to move to Phoenix.
Yeah, that's the first time I moved to Phoenix was in 1985 and stayed there for a little over a year.
And while you were going to school, did you work there as well?
Oh yeah, I had a bunch of different jobs. I just couldn't bring myself to work in the food industry or anything like that. So, I worked at Kenny Pincher Auto Parts and Goodyear Tire Store, and I loved it. It was kind of a good time. My parents paid my rent. My grandma sent me $100 a week or a month, which doesn't sound like much, but it was enough then. So I was able to get a job for screw off money, and if I needed to go home for Christmas or something and my boss didn't want to let me, I would just quit and get another job when I got back. I mean, it was great. I ended up working for Sears as a battery installer, which was the best paying job I had while I was there. I paid $4.10 an hour. And when I graduated from UTI, I used my 15% company discount to buy my first set of tools, which was a Craftsman 575 piece tool set.
Nice. Now it's hard to warranty those tools.
Yeah, yeah, it is. I still have a lot of them, believe it or not.
Well, Craftsman actually had some pretty dang good tools back then.
I agree. I agree. And I was too cheap to buy all Snap-on, but yeah, I still have them.
Not cheap, smart.
Yeah, that's true.
So then you worked as a battery installer at Sears. Did you stay there long?
No, it was probably, I don't know, 4 or 6 months.
Okay. And just worked the whole time as a battery installer? I know I worked when I went to work at Sears. I was it was in the '70s, but I spent like a week on the battery floor. Then they moved me to tires, and then when they realized I could do more, they moved me to the exhaust shop, and then to brakes, and then doing
No, I
front end
stayed in the
work.
battery. I
Yep.
stayed in the battery area, and I think they figured out I can do a little more. So I did some alternator changes and shocks and random stuff like that.
Very good. So then, after working at Alberts, then Sears, or you went to college,
Yeah,
or you went
I
to
went to
okay,
UTI, and I graduated from UTI in late '85, I think, and moved back home to Lucerne and got a job in Adelanto, which is an adjacent town to Apple Valley, as a diesel mechanic. And
that's better than 410 an hour.
yeah, let me think about that. I think my boss said I usually hire people for $6 an hour, but I'm going to hire you for 7 because you went through that school.
Nice.
So it was then I realized, wow, that the guy at UTI told me I'd be making 35 when I got out of here. So I think he was misleading me.
35 an hour, huh?
Yeah, right.
I guess you needed to be in the right location.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. And I was a naive kid. It's one thing growing up out Lucerne Valley. You didn't learn the big world. I mean, one of the best things I did, not just going to school in Phoenix, but just moving to Phoenix. I mean, that was literally the biggest city I ever seen. And living there on my own with a roommate, with my parents 6 hours away, life lessons.
Right. Right. And what was what'd you guys do for entertainment when you were in college?
Uh, I was a motorhead among motorheads. So it was great. I mean, we would hang out on the weekends at the Arby's and drag race. And I mean, I had a 72 Plymouth Satellite that blew the motor up on the way home from California once. So I built a small block 360 with a mild cam in it and changed the gear ratio, I think, and made it a little peppy. So we would drag race on the weekends and fix them up during the week. And, that was back when I was learning how bad of an idea it was to have a one vehicle that you modified that you still had to drive to school and work every day. So needless to say, I spent a lot of time on the side of the road working on cars.
That's not a bad thing later on in life.
You're right. You're right. I learned how to fix things on a whim with baling wire and duct tape. That's for sure.
As we lived on the road traveling to and from events, having those skills of patching, trail fixes, you might say, but roadside fixes was invaluable in getting to and from where we needed to go to do events.
Yeah, and I kind of grew up that way. Like I said, my dad was a cop, but he loved camping, and so we were always going somewhere in motorhomes and four-wheel drives, and we broke down constantly. I remember talking to my brother. I'm like, "Do you remember breaking down constantly when we were kids?" And he said, "Yeah." I mean, I remember in Baja, we pulled the driveline out of our motorhome, and we literally walked till we got picked up by a local Mexican that didn't speak English, and we didn't speak Spanish. And he took us to a place, and we found a U joint to fix the driveline in the motorhome. Then we hitchhiked back. This is when I was 14 or 15. But
So
yeah, constantly baling wire and duct tape.
right, and then you graduated to zip ties at some point,
Yeah, zip ties and onboard welders.
right? So when did the besides motorcycle, when did the off road bug bite?
Well, growing up in Lucerne back in the 80s, that's when they had this Firecracker 250. And Score would come into Lucerne Valley once a year, with all their glory. And the start finish line was in the middle of town and contingency. And, that's back when Ivan Stewart was big and Dave Shop and Walker Evans. And, that was my introduction to off road racing. And it was awesome. And that's kind of, where you get the wow, I would love to do this at some point. So, and later on in life, living out in the desert, we would go to desert races and bring a couple 12 packs of beer and just sit there and watch races. And next thing you know, a racer would pull up and tell us to change their tire. So, that was great. I loved doing that. And later on, let's see, I mean, I was racing motorcycles and stuff as a kid, and I found out right out of high school, as soon as I became a truck mechanic, and started making a little money, that I liked building things. I like building, even now, I like building things just as much as I like driving things. So I think I started slowly building, modifying my cars, and I got away from drag racing and got into sand rails for a while, building sand rails, and realized my hate for Volkswagens, because I mean, I can't tell you how many Volkswagens I blew up. Um, and then migrated into Toyotas, and I took a 85 two-wheel drive Toyota pickup and made it a four-wheel. No, I didn't make it a four-wheel drive. I made it into a pre-runner, made all new A-arms because you couldn't buy anything back there. I couldn't afford it anyways. So made it into a pre-runner, put shocks through the hood, put Ivan Stewart fiberglass all over it, and just beat on it out in the desert for a while. And that was about the time that I realized when computers were coming on in the late 90s that I think there's a website called Pirate 4x4, and it's really interesting. So it took me a while honestly, to figure out how to log on. And that was back when it wasn't a forum like it is now. It was just a bunch of lines. It was really hard to figure out back in the early days. And slowly figured out, hey, these guys are into off-roading and four-wheel drives. And, that's kind of how I grew up. So I eventually converted my two-wheel drive pickup into a four-wheel drive and figured, well, they do all this out in Johnson Valley, and Johnson Valley's 30 minutes away. So I thought that was probably a better idea. So I converted my Toyota and started going to the High Desert Roundup. There's an event out there that's still going on now. The Morongo Valley Search and Rescue puts on a yearly event for a fundraiser. And I went out to that, and, you start meeting people. I mean, the most awesome part about Pirate is the diverse amount of people I met.
Right. Exactly. That and then eventually all the information that is stored on that site.
It was just awesome.
So we met in, well, it was the break between 2001 New Year's 2001 2002. I had put on the first Cal Rocks event in November, Put Up or Shut Up, and I had secured a location right outside of Apple Valley that was, what was it called, Dead Man's Point? And
yes.
the owner of that property, who was a real estate agent, was really cool up until like 3 months before the event started. I mean, it happened in December. He all of a sudden he wanted all the information, all the drivers' names and information and phone numbers, contact information. He wanted to know my insurance and how that all worked, and he wanted to know everything. And I said, "Hey, you sound more like a partner, not a property. I'm renting property from you." And he goes, "Well, maybe I want to be a partner." And I said, "Well, maybe you need to start your own event series." And I turned around and walked out. I would have loved to use that piece of property, but then I was, 3 months away from doing the first series event and the second event I'd ever put on, and I had no location. And Bob Rogie and I were headed down to Johnson Valley for New Year's, and we came across this group of guys, the Tin Benders, and some of the shenanigans that you guys were involved with. And that's where I met you, and we found that location.
Yeah, where was Put Up or Shut Up?
That was at Lake Amador.
Okay, so I didn't go to that.
Yeah, it was right outside of Sacramento, about 40 miles.
That was back in the early days. And so, yeah, I mean, I don't know. You didn't want to have an event out in Johnson Valley because the BLM was such a problem to deal with, I think.
Yeah, they were difficult. It took too long to get it going.
Yeah.
They wanted a minimum of 6 months.
Yeah. So my parents were heavily involved in the Lions Club in Lucerne Valley. And I know they had, 50 acres out there, right butted up against the rocks. And I thought, it's worth going to look at. And you went and looked at it, and I thought, I don't know if there's enough rocks out there for this. But you guys have a way of finding the mildest terrain and making it really hard.
Yeah, we can do that, can't we?
Yeah. And that was actually my first rock crawling event.
Okay. Did you compete in that event?
Yes.
Okay. Pre
Yeah.
F toy then.
Pre F toy, post my Toyota pickup that I converted into 4-wheel drive. I'd fixed it up and I'd put a lot of money into it. In fact, I had shortened the back of the bed, I don't know, a foot and a half, and shortened the frame a foot and a half. So the bed on it was only about, I don't know, 4 feet long. And my goal was to get it in 4-wheel and off-road magazine. And I ended up doing that. But as soon as the magazine came out, I took a sawzall to that thing, cut the cab off, and I bought a tubing bender, and I made my first rig. And that was the rig I competed at We Rock in.
Okay.
And it was the ugliest thing, but it wheeled really well. And and camo was my spotter.
Oh, really? Eric
Yeah.
Linker. Yep. Camo.
And it was, I don't know, it must have been June or something. It was really hot, but he ended up, because he's from the beach area, that desert sun got to him pretty quick. And he ended up having to bow out, and my brother ended up finishing spotting for me.
Yeah, that was an interesting event site and competition. I can remember going through and dealing with San Bernardino County, and they required us to have the CHP, and then the CHP out of Victorville wanted us to, we had to pay $50 an hour. I think it was $49.50 an hour or something like that for the guy to sit out at the highway. But they also wanted me to pay for the mileage and his time doing rounds while the event was going on. And I'm like, wait a minute, I'm paying so that he's out at the corner for traffic control, but I'm going to pay for him to drive around and do patrolling as well. I said, I don't think so. I'll pay for the amount of time he's sitting on that corner when the event starts and at the end. And we hashed that and argued over that. And, I ended up not paying for his time going out and doing the patrol. But we, other things that happened were like, we had the courses set up, and the first day, a lot of guys, it was the first rock crawl there besides the Jeff Knowles, whatever he called his thing down there at his ranch. And so we had a lot of people show up, and we had like 3 or 4 guys with just the most beautiful Jeeps with gorgeous paint jobs. And I looked at the rigs and I said, I don't know if you guys really want to do this. Oh, yeah, we wheel everywhere. We go all over Johnson Valley and we do all this. I said, okay. And I remember the first guy gets up on the rocks, and he's, on the C courses, so the easiest courses. And he gets up there and he's just through the start line, getting up to the first gate, and he's getting a little off camber. And he called for recovery to get him off of there. And the second guy drove in, his buddy, going, oh, I can get that, and got about 10 feet farther and called for recovery. And then the 4 guys all quit, with 2 guys not even getting on the rocks. And it was like,
yeah,
this is dumb. I can't believe you would force cars into doing things like this. And I'm like, it's a competition. That's what we do. It's
well,
a
yeah,
trail
it was
ride.
foreign to people back then. I mean, the fact that we would intentionally roll these things and drive them on their sides. And I mean, I think I finished 2 courses on my starter because my fuel pump kept dying at your event. And, rolled it upside down. And that's back when the spotter could hang all off of it and everything. It was great.
Yeah, it was a little more, the spotter had to be more of a gymnast.
Yeah, my brother still talks about that, holding on to a ski rope and being lawn darted over the top of this little rise.
you need to let go of that ski rope eventually.
Right.
That's why it has a handle.
Yeah.
So it was really great working with your dad. I really enjoyed knowing him. That was Jim, right? And
Jimmy James.
Yep, and he was quite the man. Pretty cool.
Yes, yeah, he was, and that was great back in the early days. And they still talk about that event. All the old timers at the Lions Club.
Really? Huh.
Yeah.
That's interesting. I don't know if the terrain would hold the vehicles nowadays.
No, no, not nowadays. That's for sure.
Yeah, the those unlimited buggies would probably school everything out there.
Yep, pretty much.
So, what was you were working as a diesel mechanic, and how long did that particular job last?
Ah, man, that lasted a couple of years, and they opened up a terminal in Phoenix, and so I moved back to Phoenix for a couple of years and started up a terminal there. And then I ended up moving back home because my family still lived back here, and went to work for a similar company in Fontana for a while. And I stayed as a diesel mechanic for, I don't know, 25 years. You know,
Now, when I met you, I think you were working for James Gang.
no, that's my company currently.
Oh,
I
okay.
think when you met me, I was working for a company called Iron Horse,
Iron Horse. Okay.
and then I worked for 17 years. I worked for a company called Dalton Trucking. That was probably
Dalton, that's the
your
one.
yeah,
Yes.
yeah. And we actually shipped some containers back from Australia for you,
Oh, yeah.
and unloading them at our yard in Adelanto, and brought all those crazy Australians to that Henderson, Nevada event.
And then
That was great.
after Henderson, we
After Henderson, we went to John's.
Johnson Valley.
We actually took those guys. My son Luke, I'm going to guess he was 5 or 6, and he went with me, and we happened to drive one of Dalton's old Peterbilt cab overs, towed a 48-foot flatbed, and God, we had like 5 rigs on that thing. They were stacked, pumped up on each other to fit them on there. And after the event, half of those rigs were broke down. So we drove back to my house in Apple Valley, and those crazy Australians worked all night getting everything back together because they weren't leaving here without going to Johnson Valley. So the next morning, we took them out to Johnson Valley.
And I can remember the party out there wheeling with those guys. The I want to say there was maybe some Roman candles involved, and not just
Well,
shooting them in the air.
they wanted to feel the Johnson Valley Hammers experience. And, back then the tin benders were in full swing, that's for sure. So I think we gave them the full experience.
I think there was a full experience there. That's for sure.
Yeah.
So let's talk about the tin benders and how that all came about. Well, yeah, let's talk that first.
So, like I told you, I got onto Pirate 4x4. I don't know how I got onto it or figured it out or found it, but I ended up on there. And of course, Rob, I think Camo was the first one out of the Ridgecrest network to get brought into the tin benders, and it had to do with Surprise Canyon. And I was just building my rig, and I literally never been to Surprise Canyon. The last trip, I think Camo was on, Marlin was on, everybody was on the last trip. I was literally installing a winch on my front bumper that weekend, so I chose not to go, and I regret that to this day. But yeah, that's Camo was the first one in the tin vendors, and he through I didn't know him from Adam. I met him through Pirate, and I still never met him. He said, "Hey, the tin vendors are coming out to Johnson Valley. Why don't you meet us out there?" And I had just put dual transfer cases in my Toyota and Detroit lockers front and rear, and I wanted to go because I've been growing up in Johnson Valley my whole life, and I knew exactly where the hammer trails were, but I've never been on them. So I was pretty intimidated. But I met him out there, and that's when I met Rob Bender, Jerry, Fat Kid, um, and Camo. and half a dozen other guys that aren't around anymore. And we went up, I think we went up Sledgehammer. And that was the first event that I met all the tin benders, and that's how I got in.
Nice. And were you married at that point?
I mean, and it was right there. That time period is when I got married. So probably barely right then.
And how did you meet your wife?
Michelle was a friend of a friend living down in Long Beach. I uh
And you
I
were
just
able to
bought a
drag her out of Long Beach to go to the
now
high
she
desert?
her parents lived up here
Oh, okay.
also.
All right.
And I think she got tired of the rat race down there, and she was living in an apartment in Victorville and didn't like living by herself. So I had just bought a house in Apple Valley, a 2,000 square foot house living by myself. So a friend of a friend put us together as, I needed a roommate. The funny thing is, I think she only paid rent like 2 months. And, then she kept living there and she didn't have to pay anymore for some reason.
And she's never moved out.
Nope. And she's never moved out. So, yeah. So we joined the Tin Benders, and the nice part about the Tin Benders is a bunch of crazy guys, that's for sure, but they're all family guys. So, um, motley crew, that's for sure. But Michelle took a liking to all of them. They took a liking to her and all their wives, and it literally became a huge family.
Right. And they were they were pretty instrumental in opening a lot of trails down in
You
the
know,
Hammer area.
it was the craziest thing. Um, I didn't even realize what we were doing at the time. I wish I could have a do-over. I would probably pay a lot more attention to what was actually going on there. But I was just happy to be there. And as you know, the Tin Benders had a crazy reputation. And I don't know if it was deserved or not, but I was definitely one of the more conservative ones in the club. Um, but, the Rob Parks of the world made it entertaining for the whole world. And the invention of digital cameras, so we could bring it home on Monday and show everybody. Um, but yeah, it was one of those things that we would just show up out there, and I don't know, you know, Camo and Mike Hendricks and all those guys that drove 5 or 6 hours to get here. That was the crazy part. I live really close, so it was easy for me to show up. But we would meet out there twice a month at least, and as we would just sit there and talk about things, and somebody out of the blue would say, "Let's go to Wrecking Ball." And man, it was on. It was as fast as you can get in your rig and get ready. And we'd wait until everybody was ready, and we'd all take off at the same time. And man, it was entertaining and scary at the same time because, the camos of the world, they had one, no fear and didn't care if they spent a bunch of money. So you get too close to them, they'd flip you. So I would spend the whole time going as fast as I could to get away from those guys so they wouldn't ram me. And I didn't like being in the back. So it was an off-road race on these with these clapped out ass Toyotas, all the way to Wrecking Ball. And then we throw it in double low and start up the trail. And, we all had a common hatred for the average Jeep trail to where everybody would get out and spot each other over each obstacle. It would take a day to go a mile. So, we would talk shit and heckle each other and throw out the winch rope and roll each other purposely, and then we'd drive over each other, and it was awesome. So you didn't want to have anything nice, that's for sure.
And that I can remember the first time that I met you guys on that New Year's Eve weekend or whenever that period that we were down there, and I had hung out with the pirates at that point, But they were up on the Rubicon and in the trees, and we get down there, and there is no tree. There was a cell phone bush later on,
The
but
phone bush, the
yeah,
length of time.
that was the
That's
biggest
still
thing
there,
out
by the
there.
way.
Yeah, it's still there. Um, but I can remember those, sitting around and everybody going, "Okay, time to go." And we were in Bob's Commando, which there wasn't a whole lot of commando on it, even though it was a Jeep. And but he drove it like it was one of your guys' clapped out Toyotas, as you said. And it was. I think we met also that weekend. We may have met the S&N Fab guys from Washington. Might have been down there that same weekend. Jason Conover and Kane and some of those guys. So it was quite the group.
I was just trying to remember those guys last night as I was thinking to myself, I'm gonna have to remember from the early days, and I couldn't remember that guy Jason Conover's name because the rear suspension of my rig was a quarter elliptic dual triangulated 4-link, and I modeled it after something he had built. I never even heard a quarter elliptic until I seen a rig he had built, and then I put one together and copied the back of his rig, and then made a dual triangulated 4-link, obviously. And but I couldn't remember that guy's name. He was a innovator for sure.
Yeah. Yes. Absolutely. That was S&N Fab, Sweaty Nipples Off Road Team. Some of the names of clubs back then were just awesome.
Yeah, yeah.
So then that was quite the weekend. It reminded me of the Mad Max movie, driving across the lake bed on the way to the trails, all the dust trails, and as you said, the not so pretty and straight rigs. It just reminded me of like some of the scenes from Thunderdome or something.
Yeah, it was awesome. And the only advantage I had over those guys is I knew where the trailhead was. And most of those guys couldn't remember. So even if they could get ahead of me, they wouldn't stay ahead of me for long because they literally didn't know where they were going. So they'd been on the trails, but the hammer trails, if you don't know where the trailhead is, it's kind of hard to find.
Yeah, one time we were trying to find, God, I forgot what it was, and we ended up going up a trail that ended up becoming Wrecking Ball.
Yeah, that happened often.
We were like a canyon over or whatever. It wasn't the canyon we wanted to be on. And I can remember doing Upper Big Johnson. And I think it was the same weekend that it actually got broke open.
Yeah, we would regularly leave for a night run. And we would get on the trail and start heading up it. And somebody would get on the radio and say, I don't think this is Jackhammer. And we'd go a little further and nope, I think this is Claw. And just because everything looks the same at night. But
right.
We didn't care. We just keep going.
So then you guys you worked for Dalton and then you started your own gig, right?
Yeah, in 2012, the old man that taught me everything I know about trucking turned the company over to his 2 kids. And they were just uncomfortable with how big it was. It's, I don't know, something like a $30 million company. And so their intention was to stay in the trucking business on a smaller scale. So they cut the company in half. And just the half that they got rid of was the half that I ran. So, and it wasn't hard feelings or anything. It was mutual. I understood that it was a big monster that they just didn't want to keep going. So then I bought my first truck and became an owner operator for 3.5 years.
And what were you hauling mainly?
I used some of my contacts from Dalton because I knew I wanted to secure my own work. And I bought a 40-foot aluminum semi-end dump trailer because they're the most universal. You can haul anything with them. And I got a contract to haul biosolids. You know what biosolids is?
No.
It's shit. It's
Okay.
treated human waste. So I would haul one load a day from LA County Sanitation in Carson up to a compost site in Hinckley. And I would dump that out, and then I would go out to an iron ore mine out in Death Valley and pick up a load of iron for CEMEX in Apple Valley. And that's what I did every day for 3.5 years. So, and that got me started, and it paid well. So I was able to save some money and buy my second truck and hire a driver, and it kind of just went on from there.
Very good. And let's talk about those F toy years.
So Camo and Mike Hendricks, who was a tin bender and genius, and he decided he wanted to make a production car, something he could sell. He had just the company he had worked for, it was a machine shop. I think he was a shop manager. They had got gobbled up by a bigger company, so he found himself out of work, and he knew he was talented enough to have his own business. So Mike started Hendricks Motorsports with an X, and started designing a chassis, and then it kind of morphed into, let's make a chassis that fits on a Toyota pickup. And this took 6 months or more to figure it out. And of course, he lived close to Camo, and Camo was a marketing genius. At least I thought he was. And because Camo had a way of commercializing, no matter what you did, he could commercialize it. And he could sell it to people and get sponsors and stuff like that. Him and Lisa Linger were great at that. But anyways, Mike developed the Formula Toy chassis, and it was a great concept because at the time, I don't know if it was 5 years in the rock crawling thing, everybody's Toyota, we call them raisins because the bodies were so beat up that it looked like a raisin. So it was time to pull the body off and throw it away and do something else. And the Formula Toy chassis was the perfect answer for that. So Mike developed the Formula Toy, Camo marketed it. I think he went to you and convinced you to make a class in, back then it was Cal Rocks, right? Or was it We Rock?
No, it was Cal Rocks.
Yeah. And that's how it kind of started, and the first couple, Mike and Camo built the first Formula Toy, and I don't know who built the second one. Maybe Steve Parker in Yucca Valley, and Todd, one of the tin benders we call Retod. He built one of the first ones. I think it was 5 or 6 or something like that, and he was in the military, so he didn't have the time to join the class. So Dave Cole convinced me to take Todd's Formula Toy, and him and I would compete it in the first year of Formula Toy class. So I thought, well, heck yeah. So we took Todd's rig, and the fabrication on it was questionable because it was built by him and Dave Cole. So I think it took me several weeks of cutting metal off of that thing and redoing it, and to get it presentable. And we joined the Formula Toy class the first season. I don't even what year do you think that was, Rich?
Oh man, that's a tough question. I'm gonna say 2004
Yeah, that's what I was thinking.
because
So
2005 is when we changed the name to We Rock.
okay, so we joined that class, and there was 2 to 4 rigs the first season, I'm going to say, and there was always Lisa Linker was the driver of Camo and Mike's rig, and then myself and whoever else showed up. And Lisa Linker dominated that class. Her and Kevin Carey was her spotter. And I couldn't beat them guys to save my life. Because Lisa was pretty darn good. And it took me that whole first season to get good enough to where I could beat them. And I think I drove Todd's rig the second season too, because the second season is where people started joining the class. It started getting bigger.
Right.
And Marlin Crawler, Chris Geiger from Marlin Crawler had convinced them to build one. And they built one and got it all together. And I think it was the second season they started. And I was pretty good at it by then. And we went all over the place. And I remember we went to Globe, Arizona. And Marlin, being the crazy guy that he is, they worked on it the night before all night and drove all night to get there. It showed up at 4 a.m, got an hour's sleep, and we started on the courses at, I don't know, 8 o'clock. And he was dead tired. And, Marlin was good at a lot of things, but competing in rock crawling wasn't one of them. And because I think his mind just goes too fast. So he was terrible. And he would roll the rig or time out on every course. And so I felt bad for him because he's had such an awesome rig. And, it was Marlin. I think we did that that whole second season. And he made half of the competitions. So at the end of the second season, I thought, what he needs is somebody to freaking drive that rig for him. And I'm good enough. I could do it. So I took a chance, like I have several times in life, and wrote a proposal. I was a shop manager at Dalton at the time, so I knew how to write proposals. So I wrote Marlin Crawler a proposal and laid out what I wanted to do and how much it would cost him and sent it off. And a week later, Dave Carnahan called and said, I think we're going to do this. Now, later on, I found out that I think Marlin was totally against it, and so was half the guys in the shop. But Dave Carnahan said, no, we're going to trust this guy, and I think he could do a good job for us. And so that's how it started, and that's how I ended up being sponsored by Marlin Crawler for the next 10 years and competing in the Formula Toy class under Marlin Crawler.
And who was your spotter?
Well, to begin with, it was, let me think. I think Dave was done when we got in. So it was Jerry Sparks, fat kid.
Okay.
He was a tin bender. And I think the first season, Jerry Sparks did it. Because the first season that I had the Marlin Crawler rig, that's when we went to Henderson, Nevada. And that's when we went to, where was it in Texas? Spring, Texas.
Yes.
That was like the Worlds, right? Or something like that.
National Championships was in spring.
The Nationals. Yeah. And Jerry something happened and he couldn't make it. So he quit the team right before we went to that Texas event. And that's when Hobie was in it. And, Hobie's story was a great story anyways. And so we had a great time. There was a lot of good guys in the Formula Toy class. We had a blast.
And didn't Mustard Dog Eric start spotting for you?
Yeah. No, not then. Let me think. Mustard Dog was spotting for Hobie.
Okay.
And Hobie was sponsored by Trail Gear. Of course, they were our arch enemies, which, that was the business end of it. When in reality, Matt was a really nice guy to me, at least. I got along with Matt really good, and all of his guys. And it was friendly, stern competition with those guys. And well, of course, Hobie and Mustard Dog and I were all best friends, so it was a tongue-in-cheek competition at best. Right. And then I think the year after that, Hobie wasn't able to compete anymore, And so Eric, who's my neighbor, he started spotting for me, and he did that for, I don't know, a couple of years. And that's when we were really good by then. And so we won a lot. And Eric and, of course, HT, our crew chief, and we traveled all over the place. Had a blast.
I remember at Spring, Texas, you tried to use Chris Geiger as traction material. Chris
You know,
always had a knack for being in the way.
yeah. And, I think going into the Spring, Texas event, Hobie and I, which was Trail Gear, we were neck and neck. And I'd lost my spotter, Jerry. So I don't know if you remember Brett Porter, Western Fab.
Oh, yeah.
I talked Brett into coming and being my spotter. And I don't think he'd ever been a spotter before, but he knew enough because he had a Formula toy. So we went into that event, and it was, I don't know if you remember, it was hot as heck. Hotter than I've ever been, and I live in the desert.
Yeah, but it was humid too because it was right after
Yeah.
a hurricane had hit.
Yeah, super humid. So we were dying, and Hobie and I had the same score on every course. And I think it came down to that course. At the end of the day, Hobie was ahead of me, and I had a chance to catch up on that course. And it was one of those that I was timed out, and I was 50 feet from the gate. So I told Brett, get the hell out of the way, and I shifted into high range and just wooded it. And as I looked up, there's Chris Geiger. Shit. So I stomped on the brakes, but I was in the air. And I think I hit the ground and pushed him back all at the same time. I mean, I felt terrible. Luckily, it didn't hurt him. But I beat Hobie on that course. So at the end of the competition, Hobie and I had the exact same score. So it goes back to your score on the first day of the first course, and then the second course, and whoever wins. And Hobie beat me by 1 point. He beat the national champions he got by 1 point.
Wow. On the tiebreaker.
On the tiebreaker.
Yeah, it's before we started doing the shootouts.
Yeah. So it was really competitive. I mean, Formula Toy was a little boring to watch, but if you were in the class, it was really competitive.
It was only boring because you guys, are at like 600 to 1 or 900 to 1 or whatever, and you'd be on the throttle at 2500 RPM, and the tires would make one revolution every 3 minutes.
Yeah. I mean, that's what I told everybody. If I won that event, I was the most boring rig to watch out there.
Right. And so how many years do you think it was that you competed?
Well, we went all the way. I think the last year I competed in We Rock was, I'm going to guess 2008. I think so.
Okay.
Because 2007 is when King of the Hammer started.
Right.
And at least that's when the OG race started. And I raced in the Marlin Crawler Formula toy.
And that took a while. With doublers and everything.
Well, no, it didn't. There was 12 people that started, and I think I came in 6th or something like that. Back then it was such a foreign thing to do all the hammer trails in a day. And I had advantage. I knew where they all were, and I knew almost every inch of them. So, I was driving a Formula toy, which wasn't fast, but could get through the trails. I knew I could make it. So just finishing back then, you could do well.
Right. And it was there like a designed route from trail to trail, or was it just the quickest way you could get there?
No, Dave gave us a list. You're going to do in this order. You're going to go up this trail and down this trail. And some of it was obvious how you were going to get there, and some of it wasn't. And at the beginning of every trail, there was a little paper binder the spotter had to jump out and sign his name, jump back in, and that's how they could tell that we did the trail.
Okay.
So
almost like where guys would drop a chip into a can
yeah,
or something like that during the races.
yep.
Okay.
But Dave didn't even have that many people that worked for him back then. So he just trusted us to do all the trails.
And that was John Reynolds that won that one.
Yep. John Reynolds, and I think Randy was his co-driver.
Okay. And John knew the trails really well.
Yep. John knew the trails. And that was half of it back then, and just knowing where the trails were.
Right. Because there was no GPS. There was,
No.
You might have the paper map, that showed where the trails were located to each other, but you had to be able to read a map,
Yeah, I mean,
kind of
in
like
the
a
beginning,
pirate treasure map.
yeah, in the beginning, we would just take a piece of paper and put, sledge up, jack down, jack north up, and tape it to the roof of the car so we could remember what order they were in. And that's how we do it.
And are the Tin Benders still active? Or are you guys at least like an extreme camping club now or something?
No, not even that. I mean, everybody's kind of spread out, living in different states now, and no, I mean, we talk to each other on the phones here and there, but no, not hardly anything. Everybody's kind of gone their own way.
So you'd mentioned Jerry, that was Fat Kid, right?
Right.
And didn't he have a Samurai?
He did. He had that white Samurai back in the day.
Okay, because I can remember him competing in that.
Yeah, he was in that at that one in Lucerne Valley.
Right. Okay. And whatever happened to him?
Shoot. Last I heard, he was living in like Washington State. I think he'd gone to college and got some kind of degree, and I don't know.
Okay.
I don't know. He invested in some firearms company, and he did pretty well at that. But no, I haven't heard anything from him in years.
And do you still wheel?
Not as much as not hardly at all, actually. Since I started my own business, I've been trying to build a legacy for my family, and that almost takes all my time now.
Right.
So as soon as I started my own business, we were right in the middle of building a new race car for Marlin Crawler, and we had to abandon that. And no, I don't do much rig. I still have my my car. Well, you've seen it up at the Marlin event, and it sits in a container most of the time now.
And you get out to KOH?
I get out to KOH here and there, and I quit racing KOH in 2013. I think was the last year I raced it, and then I raced in another guy's car for a couple of years back then. But that's the last thing I've done. I think 2017, Luke and I raced the Baja 1000 for with another team. But that's the last big racing we've done.
Okay. And so now it's just it's all business.
Now it's all trucking. We got 10 trucks now. We need to get to 20 in the next 2 years. So, I opened up a operation in Phoenix, Arizona, and my son Luke, who's 24 now.
Wow.
He moved over there to run that part of the operation. I have a decorative rock retail yard in Victorville, also called Angel Rock and Sand.
Okay.
So, and Michelle runs the counter on that business. So we all stayed pretty darn busy.
And you're still next door to the Andersons.
Yep. Eric and Rose are still our neighbors.
Nice. And 2 years, that'll you'll have up 20 trucks, and then what happens? 2 years after that, another 20?
My goal is to get to where Luke pays me to stay away.
Nice.
So,
Okay.
however long that takes, that's the goal.
And when that happens, are you going to travel or are you going to get back into wheeling? What are you going to do? Or what would you
I,
like
you
to do?
know, I don't know. I don't know. Maybe all of the above. I have a hard time picturing myself retired. So I don't know. Whatever Michelle wants to do, probably at that point. She's been pretty good at letting me do what I want to do. So,
Comes the time for turnabout. It's fair play.
right,
Yep,
absolutely.
absolutely. And do you guys get on vacations?
Yeah, we go to Cabo once a year, the whole family, and my mom's still around, so she goes with me and they're with us. And but not much more than that. Maybe one or two times a year we get out. It's hard. We're a small enough business to where we can't afford managers, and we're big enough to where we need a couple of managers. So it's a full-time job. That's why this worked out this morning, because Saturday is literally the only day that I don't have trucks on the road to where I have to worry about people calling with problems.
Right. Well, I'm glad it worked out. It's been a
Yeah,
great
yeah.
conversation. I got to learn a little bit more about you, and talk about some of the history.
Yeah, because there's a heck of a history, and I was impressed when I seen you at the Marlin Memorial, that you're doing this to, keep the legacy alive to where people can look back and see what happened, because that thing we were all involved in, and rock crawling and pirate 4x4 was a phenomenon that I don't think will ever be repeated. And I don't know about you, but I didn't even realize it at the time until towards the end how awesome that was that we were involved in that.
Right from the ground up.
Yeah.
It is pretty cool. I remember when they had the great collapse of pirate where everybody got wiped out, and everybody had to re-sign up, and people were people go, oh, I remember 200 or something. I'm like, yeah, that was after the purge. you know
Yeah, exactly.
Don't- and some of us didn't even know you could sign back up in the first for the first week or two or whatever it was.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. It was an awesome thing to be a part of from the beginning. And all the people you met, I would have never met such a diverse amount of people if it wasn't for that website.
Because you and Eric made some trips to go get parts and vehicles and things like that I know there's a pretty good story in one of those with was it purchasing a car or something?
Yeah, I bought a Toyota 4Runner in Vegas, and I the guy was going to take advantage of me, and I ended up throwing a rod in it, after I drove 5 miles down the road. And so Eric and I, the two most not intimidating people in the world, um, went up to this guy's house and somehow, through dirty looks, convinced him to give me my money back. And then, of course, on Pirate, it blew up to this big story, of Eric the Intimidator.
Yeah,
No, we
I
have the
got a
great
big laugh out of
stories.
that because you guys are like the nicest guys in the world.
Yeah, exactly. We're just, especially me, I was glad that the guy didn't want to fight, because I'd have been screwed.
Oh God, the stories. Anyway, and some of the like Roxy Bash and all that, around the benders and stuff was just. I mean that's the stuff of epic stories, and that'll live in infamy, at least in our minds, forever.
Yeah, the campfire antics, and in the tin benders, there was definitely a day shift and a night shift, and the crazier people went towards the night shift, and I was definitely part of the day shift. But it was great, all the campfire antics, and what a But some of these guys, Bender, he's literally a genius. The stuff that he would come up with, he would show up out there with some bicycle that he made that was like 4 feet tall, and it was the hardest thing you ever seen to ride. But that's just what he did. And he'd show up with this piece of crap car that he cut the roof off and put a roll cage on and painted it like Dukes of Hazzard, and we'd go out and jump that thing. Then we blew it up. Then we tow it around the lake bed with Eric's FJ40. I mean, that was literally crazy. I think there's people that still have back injuries from that rig. And I don't know if you remember Krusty, Rob's dad.
Oh, yes.
Krusty. He had a spare tire rack on the back of his Toyota that, he thought he was being innovative, and he made it off of a Toyota spindle and hub. So he had a spare spindle and hub under there. But what it did is it made it to where the tire would spin.
Right.
And we called that the wheel of death, because we found out shortly, one, it was like 6 feet off the ground. And two, you fall off that, it would hurt you. But during all the 10-bender events, Rob had renamed it to the Wheel of Fun. And you wouldn't believe the amount of people that would stand on that thing. And I'm sure there's some neck injuries out there from that also. The Wheel of Fun.
There you go. Well, John, I want to say thank you so much for coming on and sharing your history with us. And I really appreciate that you taking the time to do this. And it was good seeing you at the memorial for Marlin. That was quite the event. It was really good to see the turnout.
It was an impressive event. The ocean of Toyotas.
Yes. Yeah, I didn't get a chance to stick around long enough to walk to walk the whole thing and get enough pictures. I should have been taking a lot more pictures, but there was too many people to talk to.
Man, wasn't it? It was a blast from the past.
Yeah, it was great. Anyway, thank you so much for spending the time, and I hope to see you again, and not so long in between times to see you.
Absolutely. We need to figure out how we can get together more often.
Exactly. All right, John, you have a great rest of your day, and say hello to Michelle for me. And glad you guys are doing well.
Well, thank you, Rich. It was good talking to you.
Okay. You take care.
All right.
Well, that's another episode of Conversations with Big Rich. I'd like to thank you all for listening. If you could do us a favor and leave us a review on any podcast service that you happen to be listening on, or send us an email or a text message or a Facebook message, and let me know any ideas that you have, or if there's anybody that you have that you think would be a great guest, please forward the contact information to me so that we can try to get them on. And always remember, live life to the fullest. Enjoying life is a must. Follow your dreams and live life with all the gusto you can. Thank you.